Welcome to my podcast, and we are behind the scenes as ever at the real Downton Abbey, which is in fact an incredibly busy castle, taking on many different roles. And a long-standing role we've taken on is as a supporter of a wonderful charity called Starlight. And it was founded by my guest today, Emma Sands. Emma, thank you so much for joining me today. And I think we have been organising an event for Starlight for the last 20 years. It should have been
That's
one more,
right.
but of course we got stopped by
Yes.
COVID.
It's coming up for our 20th anniversary event, which is extraordinary. And it's lovely for me to be able to thank you in person.
Oh, well, no, every single year, I think everybody here finds it very moving, and I hope we make some sort of contribution to your great work. But I think you founded it a few years before 20 years. It was about 36 years ago, you tell me.
It's yes, of course, it's hard to keep track, and I always get the amount wrong, but it's 37-ish, I think, here in the UK. We started in the States a little bit before that.
So can I ask you, why did you start this particular charity?
I had a brother, Jamie, who was a year younger than me. And when he was 8 and I was 9, he got a disease called aplastic anemia. And within months, he had died of that. And as you can imagine, for a family, that was just beyond. I can't even imagine now, having children of my own, how my mother and father dealt with that. But as a sibling of a child that was first of all unwell and then who had died, I was completely, my whole life turned upside down. You know, there was nothing I could do to help my parents with what they were going through. And I was the second child, the second daughter, and I was just the one who used to run around taking care of people. That was just my sort of role in the family. And there was nothing I could do. I made cups of tea, for my parents. I saw my grandfather in tears, and that was shocking and something that's never, ever left me as a memory. It was the most appalling thing to go through. And my poor brother, he was, in a lot of pain towards the end, and there was nothing we could do to help him. It was just shocking, the experience. And I was 9, so that sat with me through, at the time I was just heading off to the Royal Ballet School, where I was a student for 6 years, and then had to stop that because I had an injury, and I ended up doing some modelling, and then I went into acting and ended up incredibly fortunately getting some very good jobs. And then I realized that if you're an actor or an actress, I still say actress.
I'm never quite sure what to
I
say
know,
now.
yes, I was sticking with that for now anyway. That it gives you this amazing gift of a platform that you can use for things, that you can draw people's attention to something that's important to you. Or you can ask people favors. That was the other thing I realized. So I actually befriended, because the premiere of the first film that I did was to benefit Great Ormond Street, which is the hospital that my brother had died in.
Yes.
The day of the...
So can I ask you, what was that premiere? What was the film?
The film was called Arabian Adventure. It was shown on at Christmas time for many years. It was a family film. I was a princess. I rode on a magic carpet.
Oh,
it was
lovely.
all, yes, it was all fairly standard Arabian Adventure stuff. But it was a sweet film, and very exciting for me because it was the first job that I had as an actress, and I was the female lead in it, and it was with Mickey Rooney and Christopher Lee and just the most fantastic cast. And Oliver Tobias was my prince. But the premiere was a royal premiere. It was to raise money for Great Ormond Street, and they showed the film to the children at Great Ormond Street the same day as the premiere. It was a family film, and then the day after I went to visit them all, because they might recognize me as the princess, and just walked around just chatting to different kids and their families, and met this one little boy called Sean, who was just about to go in for a big surgery on a brain tumor. And he had tubes everywhere in him, everywhere that you could imagine, in preparation, because they were operating through the back of his mouth. So they had to immobilize his head. He had screws into his skull and into his pelvis, and he was being fed through another tube. And bless him, he was still this feisty little 11-year-old boy. And I said to him, "So what did you think of the film?" did you see the film? Yes, I saw the film. Well, what did you think of it? And he said, rubbish. So I was, pretended to be mortally offended, but we had such a laugh, and became instant friends. And I got to know his parents and kept in touch, because the nurses called me the next day and said, is there any way that you would promise to come back after his surgery? Because it would give him something to look forward to, because it really cheered him up meeting you. I think it was all the insults he liked that. And I said, of course. But so I became friends with him, and sadly learned that the surgery had not been able to remove all of his tumour, and that he therefore didn't have long left. And in the meantime, I had moved out to Los Angeles, as one does as an actress, and realised that, his absolute wish was to go to Disneyland. And at that time, there was only one Disneyland. They hadn't even opened the one in Florida. So I made arrangements for him to fly out, him and his mum.
Wow.
And brought him out to stay with me, and to, in fact, we stayed with my cousin, because I was in a one room apartment, because I still hadn't got any work in Los Angeles at that point. And we took him round. We went up and down Rodeo Drive, which is the fanciest street in Beverly Hills. We couldn't buy anything, but one very nice shop let us have some coffee and gave us biscuits. Everyone was delightful, and he had the best time, and we took him to Disneyland. Thanked him very much, because he was in a wheelchair, meant that we didn't have to stand in the queue. They put us to the front of the queue. So he was the hero for all of us for that. And we just had a marvellous time. And I had one conversation with him that was heartbreaking, because he would often say that he wanted to be a vet when he grew up, because often people would ask that question, and he loved animals. And one evening he said to me, I only say that I want to be a vet when I grow up, because he said, and I know I'm not going to grow up, but it makes my parents feel better to hear me say it. And that sort of generosity from a 12-year-old just blew me away. And he didn't live much longer after he had had his visit to Disneyland in Los Angeles. But it absolutely made me think, gosh, that was sadly the highlight of his life. And to see the look on his face, and to see the look on his mother's face as she was watching him, I just thought, I've got to do more of this for other kids who, it wasn't that much of a hardship for me. But it meant so much to him and to his mother, and it gave them a joyful memory when there weren't many of those around at that point for him and her. So my cousin, who had let us stay in his apartment, said, right, well, we must make a proper charity. Let's do this properly. And that's how Starlight began.
How amazing. So you started out in America?
Yes. That's where I was living at the time. And then as my career progressed, I could ask more people for more favours. And did. In fact, I always used to say that your worst punishment would be to sit next to me on an airplane on a long flight, because no matter what your career, your job, I will have found something you can do for Starlight by the end of it.
Oh, God, how amazing. It has changed the lives of so many children over here. And what struck me over time is, to start with, how many of the children did not have long to live after their wish and where they and their family travelled or went or met. But as we've all gone on, the treatment and the surgery has improved, and many of the children who come have these highlights in their lives, and also are able to live a bit longer, which is also very fulfilling. And I think it gives them positive moments which help them and their family, whichever the way the prognosis goes.
Well, Starlight now is very focused on making the experience of being in hospital and the recovery afterwards, because as you say, so many more now, because of wonders of science and medicine, so many children do survive. But making their experience in hospital more positive, which if you can encourage children to play, the power of play is huge. And that can transform their experience of being in hospital, which helps them heal. It helps them physically and mentally. And so Starlight is very focused on making sure that every child who's in hospital is able to have an opportunity to play, because it is therapeutic and then some for them to have that chance. And it is not just shouldn't be just an opportunity. It should be right for a child to be able to play, because it is so important to children.
It is, and there's also the colours as well. And I've sometimes been rushing to the local hospital here because my son had very bad asthma when he was younger, and you'd end up going there and my husband driving, and I'd be holding him as a baby or as a toddler or as a young boy in the middle of the night. Always happens in the middle of the
Yes.
night. And you're so desperate to get there, and you're so desperate for the oxygen, and after 2 days you're so desperate to get out because it's just enervating. There's nothing to do. And you're sleeping on a bed on the floor next door to him, obviously, and there is nothing. They are terrible
now
places.
there is. And that I'm very, very proud to say is in no small part thanks to the Starlight staff, the researchers that Starlight has employed, the marvellous health play specialists who Starlight tries very hard to support and encourage and provide the equipment that they need and the tools that they need, because the health play specialists are so skilled at making the experience for children when they're hospitalised better, which of course makes the experience for the parents better too.
Yes. Well, it gives you, I think that's that little word about hope, isn't it? That's the one word we all need.
Yes.
Even when there isn't so much hope, it's something which takes us on to the next day.
Yes.
And even if, like your brother, what a legacy he's left for everybody else.
I do feel that he had a very short life, but his life has actually affected more people in this world than any of us will in our whole long lives. He's inspiration, and what he taught me is I think very, very powerful.
So that's an extraordinary thing. So it happens every May. You must come one year.
I'm coming this next year, for sure.
So we gather together teams of supporters here, and we have a clay pigeon shoot. So it's obviously not shooting anything other than clays. It's the most amazing way to see the estate here, because they're driving round and getting out, and actually they spend most of the day eating.
Yes, I've heard that. Food is excellent.
And then they come back here, we all have lunch, and then we have an auction, a silent auction, and see what other innovative ways we can come up with of prizing a little bit more money and support out of people. And above all, I also think, so they also become ambassadors. They understand what you're doing in order to share their story that you have, and then share it with somebody else who might also have been affected and therefore wish to give support, because it's always the personal stories that walk 100 times further than others, isn't it? It's
so true. And I know from what I've been told by Kathy and all the people at Starlight that it's a fun day, but it's also a very moving day. And to do both of those at one time is quite an achievement. So
you have to
bravo.
manage it through the day.
Yes.
It does need to be fun, or you're not going to go back. And it's the same with, I think, every charity, because my number 6 sister's daughter had a liver transplant, and as a baby, and again we're helping her fundraise, but again it's a heartbreaking topic, and it also requires donors as well as the surgery and their chance of survival, and as well as that it's quite hard to raise money for sometimes all of these charities, because you need to make it a little bit more fun as well.
Yes.
But those many people who are attending because they want to support the person such as yourself or my sister. So it is. And in her hospital, again, there wasn't very much support for her daughter to play.
Well, hopefully.
But over time,
yes,
Rome wasn't built in a day.
Exactly.
So we need more supporters.
That's it, exactly.
But on another side, obviously as a career, you began as a princess.
Yes.
And haven't always been princesses in your roles on TV.
No, I've been everything from a princess to a crack addict.
Oh my God. That was quite something. But I remember Dynasty, Dallas, and then Dynasty.
Yes.
So Dynasty ran for quite some time, didn't it?
Yes, and I was lucky enough to be already on a television show in America called General Hospital, which is still running. It's been running for 60 years. I've been on and off.
How many?
60.
60.
Yes.
60.
Yes.
60
years.
It's
Golly. Very long running show. It's the longest running drama in the world. It must be. And I've been very fortunate to have played a character that's been on and off it for the last 40 years. Even since I moved back from America and live in the UK now, I still go and appear every now and then. I pop up on that show, same character, and working with the same people. So many of them are the same people.
How amazing.
It's such fun. I'm very lucky that they keep asking me back.
So I wonder if Downton will go for 60 years.
Probably will, yes. I can't imagine why it wouldn't if you'd let them. But as a result of being on that show, I got offered this other show, which luckily I hadn't seen, because otherwise I would have been so intimidated, because it was such a big hit at the time, which was Dynasty, or Dynasty, if you're American and listening to this. Yes, I have to say both now, because otherwise I get in trouble with half of the audience.
And so how many key characters are in Dynasty or Dynasty?
Gosh, I think the sort of main cast was about 15 to 20 of us. I played Fallon, but I was the second actress to play Fallon because it had been previously played by Pamela Sue Martin, who left willingly, so it wasn't that she'd been fired, because that would have been awkward to have taken over from someone who had been fired. But so they had a job available, and luckily Aaron Spelling, who was our producer, his daughter Tori Spelling, who went on to be a star herself, but at the time she was 15, she watched General Hospital and nudged her father one evening and said, "Oh, there's an actress on that show you might like to have a look at." And sure enough, I got called in for a meeting. Wow. Didn't know that was how it had come about. And they looked at me and went, "Oh, you could be the next Fallon." And I was, oh, thank you. How amazing. And sure enough, ended up on Dynasty or Dynasty.
I know, very muddling now.
But my parents were thrilled, because that was the first time there was something that here in England that they could watch that I was in. So they were very happy about that.
And how did they like your character, though?
Well, I think they probably were quite uncomfortable with some of the particularly bed scenes. I'm sure they didn't watch those with enthusiasm. But mostly I think they just realised that it was the essence of the show was so camp and so fun and so silly, really. But they loved it, as did UK and around the world. It was such a popular show.
It was hugely popular. It was the show of the time, wasn't it?
Yes, and I always felt very, very blessed to have been plucked from another show and put into it. And I was very lucky. Everyone was very nice to me. Even Joan Collins was nice to me. She was my mother on the show, so that was fortunate.
I remember that, but she was she is extraordinary.
She is extraordinary, yes.
I think I read she was 90 and still doing...
Yes.
The splits probably, and exercising every day, and
she looks amazing. It's very inspirational, and of course, actually, in general, she's very inspirational. That she was, when she started on the show, she was what would have previously been deemed old, but now, thankfully, mid-40s is not considered old. But she was very glamorous and very attractive and very sexy woman, and that was a first, really, for American television.
And she had been, wasn't it, with Olivia Oliver Tobias in The Studs?
Yes. So we had some conversations about him. Yes. Well remembered. Yes, absolutely.
I remember that. She's an extraordinary lady. So where did you go after Dynasty or Dynasty? Where did you head next in your career?
Well, the next thing I did really was to play a role which was a pastiche of my own character on Dynasty, which is a very odd thing to do. So there was a comedy called Delirious. It was a movie with MGM, and John Candy was the star of it. And it was set in the world of soap operas. And so I played a soap opera actress who was a nightmare. But that was really, really good fun and very silly. And, of course, working with John Candy was a real thrill. And it turns out that he was, sadly, the nicest, most decent, kind man, and very generous to work with, and very easygoing. All the things that comedians are usually not, he was. And he was extremely kind to me. And he made me laugh so much that the makeup people had to have a word with him and say, "Look, she's laughing to the point where she's crying and messing up the makeup. If you wouldn't mind just not talking to her in between scenes, we'd really appreciate it."
Wow. Well, what a wonderful way to shoot a film.
Yes, exactly.
Actually.
It was a joy. It was an absolute joy to go to work. And I was very lucky to continue working after Dynasty stopped. I was in another Aaron Spelling show called Models Inc., which was also very glamorous and great fun. And I played a real villain in that, which was the most fun of all, is to play the villain. and my character was very mean and nasty, which was great. And of course dressed beautifully, which was also great fun. Though the more beautifully your character is dressed, the more when you get home in the evening you wear the most comfortable clothes, because if you've been in high heels and tight-fitting dresses and all of that since 6 o'clock in the morning, you're absolutely desperate to just
wear a tracksuit.
Yes, exactly. To put on a tracksuit, for sure.
No, definitely. Is there any role that you've particularly enjoyed or has made you laugh or stands out for a reason, or is it...
Definitely working with John Candy, but also I had the enormous pleasure of working with Peter Ustinov in a film for American television, and with Tony Curtis and Peter Ustinov.
Wow.
And but Peter Ustinov was a dream come true. He was so smart and so funny.
He was a legend.
Yeah, and so nice to everyone. He was as nice to the chap who made the coffee and served the drinks as he was to the director. He was just the nicest, kindest man. And I would sit next to him whenever the opportunity arose, and he would just regale me with stories and make things up, or some were true and some weren't. And I, again, would be just laughing, but enraptured with everything he had to say. And I was very sad when that film finished as well, though we were shooting in Acapulco, which sounds very glamorous, but we were out on a boat half the time and everybody was getting seasick, and it was not as glamorous as it sounds.
I suppose we're lucky enough to see behind the scenes here, which is mainly Carmen rollers. And,
yes.
And hairnets.
Yes.
For men and women, actually.
Yes.
So that's about it. There's Ugg boots on the feet and phones in their hand and crossword round the corner.
And very early starts.
Yes, which is
very early
mad.
starts, and then trying to look glamorous from, wearing an evening dress at 6 o'clock in the morning is just plain wrong.
It is.
Unless
really
you've had it on from the night before.
In which case it's fine. You just need a bit more of the hair of the dog. That's completely fine. No, it has. It's been extraordinary. Actually, I in my university holidays worked for a theatrical agent called Julian Belfridge in my part-time. So he had in his stable, if you like, John Hurt and
oh my goodness,
Dan Day-Lewis and Geraldine James and Judi Dench and her husband and so many, John Le Mesurier. So I was very privileged to have a glimpse into your world.
Well, I'm not sure my world is of that echelon.
No, not at all. But they were so nice and so courteous.
Yes.
So I got to know them, and then I can't act at all. So
Did you ever try?
No.
Oh, well then how do you know?
Well, I don't know.
I question that.
I don't.
It's actually very easy.
My husband loves it. I mean, he's just give him a. He's off. That's fine. But I've ended up directing him actually, which is quite interesting. But I was only going to say then, fun enough, decided I enjoyed the world and it was fascinating, and the content and the storytelling.
Yes.
I then went off and trained as a chartered accountant, thinking I'd try and go back in that world on the finance, the other side of it.
Right.
But anyway, sadly, my father died and Julian died, and so my life took a very different bent. But it's curious that God's having a laugh that I'm now back in another version of that world, which is
very much so, yeah.
Which is extraordinary, actually.
Gosh.
So I was completely hopeless in Julian's office, but we had so much laughter and fun, and he didn't take life too seriously.
Right.
And I don't think I and my family ever have either. So it's a
well. I think humour is the answer to so many things. If you can get through something, no matter how awful, by finding a way to bring in some humour, that really does help so much.
It does. I'm thinking watching Peter Sellers films still make me cry with laughter. They're so simple.
The outtakes from his films too are it's impossible not to cry with laughter watching him giggling, because he was a giggler and he kept breaking up when he shouldn't, which is quite good to know, really.
That is very good to know, because very important. So looking back, you obviously began Starlight, which, I mean, would you regard that as perhaps one of the most important things you've done in your life? Well, there's your children. I mustn't forget your children.
Yes, I mean, in terms of being useful, which is always my ambition and always has been, I think to have been able to use my career for something like Starlight it makes more sense of my career for a start. Because acting is a very frivolous, really sort of way to spend your time. It's very silly. Even when you're doing something really dramatic, it still feels very silly.
But I think it's very entertaining. It takes us all into a world apart.
And interestingly enough, the COVID pandemic has proven that entertainment there's no shame in that. In fact, it's a very, very useful tool.
But think of Ensa in World War II, Emma. Because that was the same principle. What brings us together? What is a relief?
Yes. And it is important.
And I think in COVID it's just we've watched everything now, so we need something.
Yes. But certainly I wasn't a doctor. I wasn't hands-on helping people. And yet through Starlight, I do feel that I've been able to make use of a very lucky career, because acting is all about luck. There's so many people who want to be in that business, and so many talented people, so many beautiful, talented people. And the ones who end up making a career out of it and supporting themselves with their acting is so a rarefied group. And to get into that, it's luck. It's if Aaron Spelling's daughter happens to watch you on one show and want to bring you in. It's that sort of really weird, fluky kind of happening that gives you a break. So there's a lot of survivor's guilt if you're a success as an actor or an actress. If there isn't, there should be, because if you don't realise that luck is the main reason why you're there, then it means you're not thinking very carefully about it. So it definitely has helped.
That's interesting, because I think the word survivor's guilt is also applied to, you think, why my brother, why not me?
And why, yes.
And it's very hard to live with that sometimes. But
exactly,
to talk about it.
Because to have seen your sibling die is something that makes you see life and death and religion and all of those things in a very different way. So yes, I'm sure there was a part of that too.
And that different skill sets you need to somehow paper over it. And
yes.
You're left with the scars,
yeah.
but you can deal with the scars. It's just trying not to open it all up again, isn't it? Which is the interesting thing.
But also my other brother, because I had a sister and a brother left after my brother Jamie died. My little brother used to say, look, you've still got a sister, you've even still got a brother, but I haven't. So I became a bit of a tomboy just so I could play with him. So he still had not a brother anymore, but at least somebody who would play with the cars and the sort of boy things. And that, I'm sure, was what you were saying was, a bit of my first acting job really was pretending that I was interested in all the things that my little brother was interested in, just so as he had someone to play with still.
But it's all those many small acts of kindnesses which mark us all out and make for a better society, which we're trying to find, I think, today sometimes. And perhaps are the things we should look for, but that's a little bit more serious. So it's fascinating, Emma, your career has brought such laughter and yet at the heart has made such a contribution to people in desperate hours of need, which is some of the families who come here to talk about it, to try to put that understanding across to the other people in the room who may not have come across that, and I hope they haven't.
And I hope they never do, yes. It's talking to the parents now when I visit a children's hospital. As a parent myself, it is so hard to imagine what they're going through.
Are your children involved in it at all? Do they help you too?
I used to force them to come in to volunteer, but not in the fun, exciting events like the one here, but the boring things, because, charity work is both fun, but also there's a lot of drudgery involved. You have to do the filing still. You have to my son's specialty was sticking the labels onto the collection boxes. And he would make this enormous pile of this pyramid of collection boxes that he'd stuck the labels on. And I got my daughter involved with it. She would have to do filing, because it was really important for them to know that though they saw me doing a lot of really fun and exciting, meeting interesting people, that actually, if you don't do the office work, those things, to run a charity is if you're taking people's donations, you have to do a good job. You have to do it properly, and you have to honour their hard work that they've done to raise the money to give to you. You have to, especially these days, be so diligent. And I'm happy to say that, now that charity work, philanthropy is not just a hobby for some people, it's a proper career. And we have at Starlight experts, people who know how to run a charity, people who do it properly. And for me, that's I'm in awe of how they manage to honour the people's donations, people who have donated their time and money. Because
it matters to someone who's holding it, because I want to know that the money that is being raised is actually going I completely understand you need good administrative officers at the centre in order to maximise the donations and the distribution of them. But if that's not there, I probably
you wouldn't be
step
interested
away
in helping
from the charity,
and
until
rightly
I know
so.
that is so.
It has to be
So
done
is that.
properly. It's one of the things that I'm so thrilled about is that Starlight has recently become very much sort of the leaders into the research of what play means to children, especially children who are hospitalised, and how much the power of play can help with the healing. If a child is in hospital and is traumatized by that, they're not going to get better as quickly as if they come there knowing there are friendly people, there are things to do, there are still happy times even
And it's a
when
happy
they're there.
place.
Yes.
It has to be a happy place.
Yes, and Starlight is one of the leaders now in that whole new field of the importance, the right that children have to play even when they're in hospital.
No, it does help them. It's the interaction. Funny enough, this was a hospital here during World War One.
Yes.
And Almina tried to heal people in body, but also in spirit. So all the nurses, although these were adults, these were grown men
Very
in their times of
traumatised
need.
ones.
But they would play Scrabble, they'd write letters, they'd read to them, so interact with them. And that's what sometimes is missing. And that's what is a huge help in order to, again, heal people, which is what Almina did. So it is a good story, and it's an adult version of unwinding and expressing themselves when they most need it.
You wrote a book about that.
No, I did.
I'm going to have to read that.
No,
for
I'd
sure.
love it to give it to you. It was the first book I wrote
Right.
about an extraordinary lady who, again, made such a contribution to other people's lives, their husbands, their brothers and sons, and tried to make them better.
Yes, in different ways that maybe weren't at
every
that
way.
time.
Well, there was an operating
realised.
theatre here
Gosh.
and a radiology. She was extraordinary. Cleanliness, but then you just read about the Scrabble, the reading, the sitting outside, the taking time. And she and her husband would go around chatting to them, chatting to the patients in all the beautiful
Amazing.
bedrooms here, because that kind of helps.
Yes, it definitely helps.
So, Emma, if I can ask you, in terms of acting, is there some new role that you're looking forward to that you can talk about?
At the moment, I've been rather sort of distracted by, I've been fixing up, this is not anything to do with acting, but I've been fixing up the coach house at my home in the Cotswolds. And that's been quite all-encompassing, actually.
Yes.
I've loved every minute of it. But now there's talk of me doing some sort of program to do with interior design, because I absolutely love bringing together all recycled furniture, all things that people have used before and don't want anymore, and making a beautiful home, an environment for people where they feel comfortable, but also is visually pleasing. So that's a possibility of something that I might be doing in America, which is hosting a design program.
Because that's all I do here.
Yes.
I'm just always recycling and upcycling,
Yes.
which I thoroughly enjoy. I'm just in the midst of doing one suite. And I've actually just started in the top floor of the castle, where I'm redoing a bedroom in memory of my ma-in-law, who's from Wyoming. I spend some time trying to think about what I'm trying to do with it.
Yes.
And how to make something lovely.
Yes.
And then have started checking the roof out, which obviously needed to be done.
Oh, gosh.
But then I've found that the roof is apparently in pretty good nick.
Thank goodness.
And it's made, this particular room, it's about this size, of recycled ship's timbers.
Oh, my goodness.
I find that amazing.
Yes.
But it's fantastic, Nick, and it's wonderful. So that I was very encouraged by that. But unexpectedly, the floor's got to come up because it's full of woodworm.
Oh,
So that was the unexpected bit. But underneath it, it's just the top part of it. So that's quite good. But I love the idea that in 1855, when they were rebuilding it from top of the Georgian house,
Yes.
which was on top of the Tudor house, on top of the medieval palace, on top of the Anglo-Saxon house. So I've been here since 749 AD, just very good anti-wrinkle cream. But that they were using...
They were reusing things.
Recycle ship's timbers,
Yes.
because ships were being less made out of wood, and that's what they were using. Phenomenal. I mean, our ancestors were so clever.
Yeah.
And here in this house, you're just borrowing something from somewhere, repainting it, restuffing it, repositioning it,
right.
and off I go again. So I'm always doing up cottages. So
Right.
I've usually got 2 or 3 on the go, and each time try to improve it. So I completely agree with you. I love creating spaces that make people happy.
Yes, that's exactly the words for it. It is very rewarding, and you know that it's going to last. You know, for me, a film that I've been in is over in an hour and a half. Whereas if I leave behind a really lovely space for people, then you think, well, that might get more than an hour and a half of pleasure. Hopefully, you know, it will be around like that for a good few years.
And I just went into a house I'd done some time ago because there's a new tenant who I think I liked very much, so they're going to take it. And I meet everybody and try to figure out what makes them happy rather than anything else. And I was actually chuffed because, very English word, because I'd created a big open plan kitchen area and a little patio outside for coffee in the morning. Very important for me, my coffee. And then another place for coffee. And actually I go in there quite nervously thinking, what do I have to do? Is the bill going to be huge? To actually find, it was quite good actually. And it's going to come forwards again. So it's amazing. So that's the other side also of what I do. It's really plumbers, electricians and roofers who are on my little wet book. So that sounds fun. I'll be watching it to get some tips from you.
I don't know if it'll happen or not. Of course, Hollywood's famous for its, let's do a program, and then you have to go through this massive process of selling it and people buying it and then distributing it, and it's all very complicated. By the time they've finished with it, the network, it probably won't even be a design show anymore. It'll have taken off in some other direction. But I am determined to just communicate to people that actually if you reuse things, it's better for the environment, and actually you end up with something that's unique and going to be much more personal to you.
Well, it's recycling, and I'm so often repainting old furniture in funky colours.
Yes, I love doing that.
And I've just painted a very boring pine cupboard, but the back is quite a bright yellowy colour, and the outside is a teal colour. And it just looks such fun.
Yes, colour is so influential in our moods.
That sounds amazing. And perhaps lastly, I can ask you, so what are your wishes and dreams for Starlight? Have you got a sort of 5 and 10 year plan?
I mean, the plan is to make sure that every child who is both hospitalised and then when they're recovering afterwards have access to as much support for the play that they need. That's our specialty. That's what our goal is to make sure that they can play as much as they deserve to, they have the right to, that they have the equipment, they have the tools, the encouragement, the support.
And are you also taking them on different trips should they so wish?
Well, what we do now is because we are so concerned about honouring donors' money, is that to send one child and a family to Disneyland is incredibly expensive. So what we would rather do is send a group on a trip together. So whether it's to Disneyland or possibly not, we can find ways to give them an equally marvellous experience, but in a way that's going to really reach way more children and their families. And actually, of course, it turns out that if you send a group on a trip or provide a party for a group of children with all kinds of magical entertainment in it, the bonding that the parents
and for the parents
go through,
too,
for them to find other adults who are going through the same experience as them, which is so hard to comprehend for anybody who isn't going through that experience of having a very unwell child. There's more value to doing these events in a more of a group way, and it's a much better use of the funds that we are so privileged to have been given.
Emma, thank you so much for joining me today. I've loved welcoming you here. And for all of you listening, please do go to the Starlight website, which is starlight.org.uk. You can also find it in Australia, so please go online and see the extraordinary work they do, and of course in America. And I know quite a few of you in America love Dynasty and Downton Abbey and General Hospital.
Yes.
And now, please go and have a look at Starlight. It does an extraordinary amount of amazing work at the moment of greatest need for families and children. So thank you, Emma.
Thank you for having me. It's been an absolute thrill.
Thank you, Emma, so much. And just to remind you, please do subscribe to this podcast. Then you can have it every time it comes out.